Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dharmica Mistry, and I'm Head of Medtech and Biotech at Cicada Innovations. So last week, we announced the rollout of Cicada Innovations' newest workshops. So it's called Cicada Medlab Commercialisation 101 workshops, and they're going across the countries. So these workshops are supported by the READY initiative and powered by MTP Connect, and we're really excited to be able to offer them to you all. Our goal is to equip participants with the knowledge and skills to get them started on the journey of commercialising a medtech or biotech solution. So for those of you who don't know us, Cicada Innovations is Australia's pioneer deep tech incubator, supporting startups and scale-ups solving the world's most pressing problems. And quite frankly, we have a long history of medtech companies in Cicada Innovations, and we're really delighted to be providing these workshops as part of the greater READY initiative to the entire Australian ecosystem, because it aligns with our mission to support capacity building in our clinicians, researchers, and community in their commercialisation journey. So I'm going to hand over to Rebecca Tunstall, the Senior Director of Stakeholder Engagement from MTP Connect, to tell us a bit more about MTP Connect, but also their role in supporting our ecosystem, as well as some more information on the READY initiative and its mission. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thanks so much, Dharmica, for the introduction, and thanks for the invite to be here. It's great to be part of this session. I too would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So for those who are not familiar with MTP Connect, we're an independent not-for-profit growth centre established through the Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources in 2015. And we are here to drive the rate of growth of Australia's medical technologies, biotechnologies, pharmaceutical and digital health sectors. Now, we work with all participants in the sector, whether that be small or large companies, researchers, industry associations, governments, universities, investors or regulators, to achieve four broad outcomes. And they are to increase collaboration and commercialisation across the sector, improve access to global supply chains and international markets. We also work to optimise the regulatory environment. And importantly for today's session, we work to improve management and workforce skills, as indeed a bright and strong future for our sector is dependent on our workforce having the right skills. So one of the ways that we work to deliver on our objectives is to deploy strategic funding into the sector to support strategic initiatives. So through delivering this funding for strategic initiatives, we deploy more than $160 million of DISA and MRF funding into the sector across 5 key programs. And one of those programs is the Researcher Exchange and Development within Industry program, or the READY initiative, which is funded through the MRFF, and it's a $32 million program over 4 years. Now, through the delivery of this program, we are focusing on systematically addressing gaps in skills for the MTP sector and ensuring Australia has an industry-ready workforce. We know that the MTP sector in Australia is a vibrant and critical to Australia's economy, as well as health outcomes of the population and innovation ecosystem. There are nearly 1,300 companies in the MTP sector, which employs approximately 70,000 workers and contributed more than $5 billion in gross value added to the economy in 2019. The sector enables access to innovative therapies and medical devices that assist in the diagnosis, treatment and monitoring of disease, and delivers significant benefits to patients to improve overall population health outcomes. Now, the MTP value chain encompasses a wide range of participants, and each plays a critical role in the sector's growth and success. And while the Australia's MTP sector has been delivering strong growth, there's certainly significant opportunities that remain to build capabilities in the sector. So just a little bit about the READY program. So the READY program consists of 3 pillars. Pillar 1 is around the expansion of proven programs for addressing known skills gaps. So we've got partners on board from the start, which were And Health, IMNIS, MDPP, the MedTech Actuator and GSK Australia. Pillar 3 is centred around industry placements and fellowships to facilitate real experience within industry. We've got programs such as APR Intern, the Bridge and Bridge Tech programs, which are supported through READY. And we've also got the MTP Connect READY Fellowship program that commenced this year and is ongoing as well. Now, a key foundation for the second pillar was that MTP Connect conducted a comprehensive root and branch review to uncover new and prioritise skills gaps across the sector that need to be addressed. So this analysis was really an essential step and formed the foundation for READY to deliver a contestable program for new initiatives. And this is directly related to today's discussion. So the skills gap analysis and the report, which can be found on our website, analysed skills across 7 skills themes, and those themes ranged from advanced manufacturing and supply chain, business operations, clinical trials, health data and cybersecurity, health economics and regulatory affairs, and of course the skills required for successful product development and commercialisation. Now, one of those known skills gaps under that theme of product development and commercialisation is the ability to identify the unmet need in the market, as well as understanding how the proposed solution would be used in the clinical environment. So it's key that this is identified at the outset and continually evaluated through the development process to ensure that the technology meets the needs of the end user and is actually taken up in clinical practice in order to have the greatest impact on human health and be a successful innovation as well. So not being able to identify the unmet market need early and keep evaluating that certainly can lead to wasted resources and energy, and also has a flow-on effect, as it's an important skill as a precursor to ensuring that you'd be able to secure funding or investment, or ensure that you're able to collaborate with industry or other partners. So it's great to have Cicada on board as a partner in delivering these workshops, and it's great to be here for the launch of Medlab Commercialisation 101. So I look forward to the rest of the session and hearing from Robert and Matthew as well. So back to you, Dharmica.
Thanks, Rebecca. So I might just take a moment to go through what Cicada Innovations is offering as part of the READY initiative, because I'm sure that's what you all also want to hear about. We've developed a 2-day workshop, which is all about immersive learning in a facilitated environment. So these workshops focus on learning, as Rebecca said, how to identify an unmet market need, understand its clinical context, and then validate that medical idea in a classroom setting. So this means all ideas are welcome and no idea is too small or too far-fetched. Our workshops will begin with an online course which covers the principles of research commercialization, idea validation, and customer engagement. And this is about getting across the theory so that you can come into the workshop hitting the ground running. So the learning modules, the online learning modules will also include worksheets and some quizzes to get you going before you walk in the door on day 1. So that's the pre-work, and then you'll attend a 2-day workshop in person with a fantastic facilitator and with your cohort, and you'll come in to really stress test your idea and apply all the things that you've been reading about and watching on the online education series. And everything you do in these workshops is all about your idea or technology, right? So day 1, you'll cover understanding that clinical context, and you'll start developing a business model, and you'll begin working out what a viable product actually could be, and you start to understand your path to market. And then on day 2, you'll be working on identifying and talking to customers and learning to communicate your ideas to these people. And then you're going to get started on understanding your market opportunity. And finally, you'll be on your way to validating your idea. So over the 2 days of the workshop, you're going to hear from a variety of guest speakers from our expert alumni, highly experienced residents here at Cicada Innovations, and also from leading medical researchers at the George Institute of Global Health. For dates, I'm going to go through them just because it's good to let you know, so you've got a rough idea. We'll be running these workshops firstly in Sydney on August 24 and 25, followed by Canberra on the 27th and 28th of September. Melbourne will be the 29th and 30th of September. Brisbane, 25th and 26th of October. Perth, 27th and 28th of October. Hobart, 29th and 30th of November. And finally, Adelaide on the 1st and 2nd of December. So who is this for? It's for people who want to learn about medtech and biotech innovation and commercialization, but it's also for people who want to know how to get started. So you can be a clinician, a researcher, a budding entrepreneur, a health professional, or even working for a medtech startup or small to medium enterprise. All you need to do is have an innovative solution in either digital health, diagnostics, devices, or therapeutics. And you might be asking, why do I have to have an idea to come to this workshop? This is because we want you to come armed with something that you can work on, because the workshops are really, really interactive. So an idea can be really early stage, a thought that you've had from your research or something that you've encountered in your clinical environment. It could be a back of a napkin idea or something you've had on the back of your mind for some time, or it actually could be something you're working on now and you're spinning out in real time. So the idea is that you apply the learnings to the idea, and from these workshops, you get to walk away with the ability to identify unmet needs in the healthcare system. You walk away with a customer discovery plan and the ability to articulate your value proposition. You walk away knowing how your technology fits into the market, and you have an understanding of the competitive landscape and the pathway to get there and what your next steps are. So these workshops are about taking the first steps when you have an idea, but what is the journey ahead really going to look like? So we've got some people here who are going to tell us that, our industry experts who have actually been there and done that. Joining us today, we have Matthew Lipscombe, a startup survivor and a veteran of ResMed. Matthew is now making his mark at Cochlear. He's the Director of Portfolio Strategy and Planning, and he's an expert in strategic planning and marketing and hugely passionate about technology. He thrives on moving great people closer to their vision. And we also have Robert Gorkin, a medical engineer by training. Robert is now a serial entrepreneur, and I can attest to that. And he's passionate about making the world better through commerce and technology. So Rob is the CEO of Eudaemon Technologies, which he is also the co-founder of. And he's leading the development of next generation devices to revolutionize sexual and reproductive health. Thank you both for joining us today. I've had the great privilege of working with both of you on some of our initiatives, and it's really good to have you both here to share some wisdom. We might start with you, Matthew. You work for Cochlear, one of Australia's most successful medtech companies, but by training, you're actually a mechanical engineer, computer scientist with an MBA. So what drew you to work for Cochlear, and how did you actually get there?
Thanks, Dharmica, and hi, everyone. Look, I guess I've always been interested in the confluence between technology and commercialization, and specifically commercialization that helps change people's lives, hopefully for the better. As you mentioned, growing up, I had sort of vague notions about how I might get there, and I knew that formal education was a part of the puzzle. Obviously at uni, I tried to bracket my ambition with sort of computer science and engineering, and after a bit of time, an MBA. But I guess what really made the difference over the years is working with really great people, and people who are passionate about taking an idea and using it to help people right now. And I'm just going to focus on that, so to emphasize that right now piece. I was lucky enough to work at ResMed in the very early days, many years ago, where Peter Farrell established a really passionate team and instilled them with a legendary sense of urgency. And that sense of urgency made a serious impact on people's lives. Obstructive sleep apnea wasn't even a thing back then, and now millions of people are being helped face a very debilitating condition. That inspired me to branch out with a friend in a software startup. That didn't work. We had to turn the lights out during the GFC, but that led me to Cochlear, where I've been for the last 10 years. And Cochlear is, again, a really passionate bunch of people, very broad skill set, very deep understanding in the various domains, and the sense of urgency is still there. That is, how do we help as many people as soon as possible?
Gotcha. Thanks, Matthew. Such a cool career you've got there. Rob, similarly, biomedical engineer with an MBA. You're working in an academic setting, and then you went out to spin a technology and be at the helm of a startup. Do you want to tell us about how you got there and why?
Yeah, thanks, Dharmica. And again, hello, everyone. Yeah, I never planned on being a CEO or having professor in my title, and I'm very happy that I do. But like you said, my background was in engineering, and translation was always on the radar. I was instilled in me very early on that to gain industry support was how you survived and actually thrived if you were in an academic setting. And there's a natural link between industry and funding. But probably more importantly, there's a link to real world needs as well that you don't always see when you're, in your ivory towers or whatnot. And in the case of the latest thing that I've been doing, look, it was an opportunity. The Gates Foundation came out with a call for next generation condoms that would, improve improve to stop STDs and unplanned pregnancies and the massive global impact that has. I was not working on condoms before. I knew what condoms were, obviously, and in them in some ways, but was working in 3D printing and trying to make next generation prosthetics and implants. But we just so happened to be working with some materials that were very tissue-like, and it was a good pitch to try to put these materials into this legacy medical device that could be revolutionized. And after 3 or 4 years in that research setting, the project evolved to needing the right vehicle to move forward. And we were working with industry, but it just wasn't ready yet. So we had to go out and build the right organization to take that forward. So necessity became part of that. So I think in the past, I have been part of a few companies and on that translational side, there's lots of ways to embrace innovation, entrepreneurship. It just so happens that this is the right role for me right now.
Fantastic. And necessity and urgency, they're sort of key things here, because that means it's a driver for what you're trying to do, and it's a real motivator. I don't want to give away the entire curriculum here, but I do want to talk about why commercialization is just as important as research in this space, and also ask you, what does commercialization actually mean to you? Because that's a word we hear a lot in the ecosystem. It's thrown around, everybody should be commercializing, but what is that? So we're going to kick off with you, Matthew, and then Rob just answer after Matthew.
Well, I guess without getting all philosophical, it's obviously crucial we continue to seek to understand our world, even if those commercial linkages are not clear. All this knowledge will help someone at some time, even if we don't know who or when. However, using any new understanding to help people right now has a couple of benefits. Well, firstly, you help people right now. Secondly, given there's so much we don't know about the world, it can help prioritize what might be the most important problems to be solved. Even it triggers a moment of reflection. And thirdly, you can generate the money and aggregate the skills potentially needed to continue the research and continue to learn. So it has that sort of virtuous cycle, if you will.
And I'll stick with kind of the academic bones of this, but I remember I talked to a collaborator from one of the other companies I was at RMIT. This was pre this boom in promoting commercialization. But he was saying, look, for a researcher, it's just not good enough to just do high quality research and publish. Impact means getting out to people. Commercialization is an extension of that. And not that you have to do the whole thing, but that you need to be a part of the process. And again, I guess I'm an atypical academic from my early stages, but it's a luxury and potentially a legacy that academics could just purely do what they're interested in. There's accountability. A lot of times it's public funding. There's a return on investment. It needs to get back to the community and where some of this funding came from. And a way to get there is commercialization. So broadly, it can bring in support, and you can use it to gain supporters that eventually, could be 10 years down the line, actually translate something out. And more importantly, I think on a personal level, for everyone, these skills are transferable. They're wanted by every single employer out there. You don't need to be a startup or a CEO. You can use entrepreneurship and innovation as an entrepreneur inside organizations. It's important for anyone to keep relevant and to be attractive to a world which we know has a lot of change. Changing is very dynamic, and there's a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, fantastic. So both of you have, exactly what I think commercialization is as well. And especially with, most people in STEM derived disciplines, even in the startup space, have got an academic background, and they know that it means to drill down. So having that broad reaching T-shaped skill set you know, is very important, but also not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, and that's okay. As you highlighted, both of you highlighted, it's okay, but you do need to, I guess, have a public facing, as we're seeing with COVID, public facing scientific, you know, reach, I guess, communication about what you're doing and why it's important. So I guess the opportunities that you both see in medtech and biotech, do you think we're solving enough of the problems that we're seeing in healthcare, or not? Maybe Rob, you want to start us off?
Yeah, no, I don't think. I think there's plenty of opportunities out there. I don't think we'd be doing this if so. So, look, I'll frame this in three ways. So, from a large level, waste, food, and energy. These are global areas of interest with a growing population and a lot of there's tons of investment and tons of need. We talk about this all the time. I also think mental health and well-being is going to grow, particularly in the next couple of years as more populations become more wealthy. It's the next thing that's going to happen. From a national and potentially the state side, look, there's opportunities. Industry 4.0 and AI and MI or machine learning, very oversubscribed terms, and I don't think they're fully understood, but the ability to take superior data and make rapid, effective, resilient decisions based on R&D and production, there's huge opportunity there. And I would say it's more than just drug development. This is automating and linking consumer or patient or clinical insights and data to extract leads. And then personally, and from a local level, I'd say we're really somewhat inefficient in our healthcare system. I mean, from the US, we do very well in a lot of things, but to truly identify the needs of those local healthcare districts and then process to enable to answer those needs and to introduce new interventions in both the public and the private system. So I think we can do a lot there, and there's a lot of opportunities for everyone in the audience and otherwise to help solve these problems and create businesses by that.
Okay. Yeah, good points. Matthew.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Robert. That's a hard no. There are so many opportunities here. If you think about the problem space, it's enormous. There are so many challenges that the skill sets and the understanding that people have to actually make a real world impact. For example, if we look at the so-called developed countries, the implications of an aging population on rapidly increasing healthcare costs as society is just one amazing sort of watermelon that's ingested by the python coming down the pipe. And then if you look at the so-called emerging countries, the implications of relatively poorly developed clinical infrastructure, but with the opportunity potentially to pivot to a new care model that delivers great outcomes, sort of so-called first world outcomes without necessarily first world costs. There's actually a massive opportunity there where these economies could pivot straight to a much more efficient outcome. So I'm always excited in the broad digitalization of healthcare, which I think can make a huge impact on both of those. Rob touched on a part of that, AI. So for developed countries, there's you can potentially contain costs and gather clinical insights and push it across the entire value chain. For emerging countries, there's the opportunity to radically lift the health and well-being of people without necessarily using a high-cost Western model of delivery to achieve it. So that's just two areas.
Yeah, both really great. And I think it is about people talking to each other, right, as well, and across different disciplines, which is how we see things being solved here at Cicada Innovations. It's multidisciplinary teams across different sectors talking to solve the really, really big problems. Let's talk about the actual journey of commercialization in this sector, so medtech and biotech. What can people expect to encounter along the way? So it can be anything that you've experienced yourself or things that you've heard, whatever works.
Where do you want to start?
Oh,
sorry. Yes, I should say somebody should go first. Matthew, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, well, thanks, Robbie. Look, firstly, there's lots of conflicting views. So if you've got an idea and you think, oh, it'd be, how do I actually bring that to market? How do I get it in the hands of people? You'll find there's lots of conflicting information and views, and there seems to be lots of complexity. The structure of the medical device and biotech market seems very opaque. How do I navigate it? It's not always clear when you start this journey what's the most important thing you should be doing right now. If your ambition is to achieve that outcome, what should I be doing right now? And without some structure, often you'll get a variety of different conflicting views. So I guess I want to say that one of the things that people might encounter is uncertainty and an opaque approach.
Gotcha.
Right, I'll go. Yeah, high level first, and so pain, exhaustion, stress. And on the flip side, fulfillment, success, meaning. I think a couple of things. It will be uncomfortable and unfamiliar and potentially overwhelming at first, and that's okay. It's part of the process. There's a lot of things that you don't know and you got to work through. I think another thing is you'll find that there's a ton of people who want to help you, and that's good. But there's also very few that actually will or are actually in a position to help. You need a team, so to back you up and pick you up when you're down and celebrate with you when you win. Expect to be rocked by totally unrelated global and local influences. An election or COVID or whatnot will totally change. Think you could be doing everything right, and then all of a sudden, it's not going to fit. But if you look back, you'll see that you've grown real stronger. So that's a high level. On a very specific level, I think the Ready program that we're here talking about today really goes into a lot of those things that you'll see on the journey. But those are probably some of the things that I've experienced from looking back on it for the last couple of years.
Gotcha. And I guess those sorts of things are validating and walking through all those stakeholder engagement pieces. And I guess if you join the program, you'll know what I'm talking about. What do you guys think are the 3 skills, like top 3 skills that people might not think that they have or don't know that they need when they're translating a research idea? Rob, why don't you kick us off on this one?
Yeah, I think you touched on some of these before, but and Matthew as well. Being able to evaluate opportunities and distill impact is a key skill, and it takes time and understanding. And that's, I think, something that is gone over quite heavily in the program, which is good. Second thing, embracing failure. In this ecosystem, failure is not an endpoint. It could be a turning point. It actually could be a starting point. So the ability to also progress through failure is your street cred, essentially, in the ecosystem as well. And then final thing, understanding and internalizing risk. And what I mean by that is that you're really never going to know 100% the right path. And that is nowhere more apparent than in entrepreneurship. You have to take positions and move forward, and building those skills will help you to move the ideas from a concept more towards something that's actually translated.
Matthew, how about yourself?
Yeah, look, I really like Rob's perspective there, especially, for example, around a perspective of risk and recognizing what the appropriate balance of risk is. Another aspect, I think one superpower would be that recognizing the learnings of others can really help. So there are other people that have been on this journey. Why knock yourself out learning something that somebody else might be able to steer you in the right direction? And understanding, the source of that information, and also recognizing that you sort of can't do it on your own. Robert, you mentioned earlier about the team. There's some really specialist domain stuff that just is what it is. Regulatory, reimbursement, quality systems, legal, privacy, yada yada. And it's just better if you can get the lowdown early directionally about the sort of magnitude of those problems, so you can map out a successful path and manage risk appropriately.
Gotcha. And I think you touch on a very important piece, both of you, which is that community. And that's what we have here at Cicada, which is invaluable for our residents, is everybody's going through the same journey. And I think it can be quite isolating in entrepreneurship when you think you're the only one going through something and it's just so hard. And then you sit around and talk to people that are doing the same thing and you realize, actually, I'm not alone. And this is normal. And it's the way you move forward. So fail forward, I should say. Cool. Yeah. Okay. So as an academic turned entrepreneur, Rob, I know we keep talking about challenges, but what are some of the more specific challenges that you've had with Eudaemon that you didn't foresee when it came to perhaps your skill set in particular as well?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll start with there's lots of similarities as well as some key differences. I think the commonality is the search. So in an academic setting, you're searching for new knowledge, and in an entrepreneurship setting, you're searching for a process, you're searching for the answers to get something out. And there is a process in both that helps you gain that knowledge. And there's actually commonalities between the scientific method and some of the explorations when you look at the business model canvas. So you kind of well set in some ways from an academic perspective to jump into this. However, there's huge differences. So an academic, you're expected to be an expert in your field, right? You're expected to communicate at length. I'm sure all of us in the audience have, or if you've read a scientific paper, it is not an easy thing to just digest. As an entrepreneur, you have to get right to the point. You got to get people behind you. So there's a certain language and engagement with the ecosystem which is critical for success, and that you need to get trained in that, or at least I needed to refresh in that quite and continuously. Another thing, entrepreneurship comes in many flavors. It's risky. So in this case, I stepped fully out, but in previous cases, I was kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, or there's other ways of doing that. But now knowing from doing it this way, it's different when you see it from the sidelines. There's skills you can learn, but the practice is only where you can truly understand them. So getting out, it's just something you can't find unless you do it. And then finally, and I think I mentioned this before, getting comfortable with taking positions where you don't have all the info. You don't know if it's right or wrong. From an academic perspective, that's not always done. Sorry, kids. You often don't know. You're expected to have the answers, and you're not really. You don't say something unless you know it for certain, or you're very uncomfortable saying that. In an entrepreneurship, on a daily basis, even on an hourly basis, sometimes you need to take positions and be confident that you know enough to move it forward in a way that will continue to move things. So very big difference there.
Gotcha. And Matthew, two big medical device companies, ResMed and Cochlear, who probably weren't always that big, maybe or maybe not when you joined. How big or small were they when you joined, and what were your skills gaps at the time?
Do you know, I reflected, we were talking about this earlier, and I have to say, I really was clueless beyond comprehension in every case. There was just so much I didn't know. I guess the mechanics of operating within a regulated market, different sorts of clinical approaches, I guess the constraints with information sharing, except there was just so much I didn't know. And I guess we've talked about this before, but luckily I've always had access to people who've been patient, kind, and knowledgeable. Maybe in some ways my biggest skill gap that was instilled on me early was really a sense of urgency to an actual outcome. And that sort of constant push that validating with an actual outcome sort of I guess forged in fire was quite a good approach. And maybe to Rob's point about the ambiguity, the missing pieces of information would be soon resolved by pushing hard as you can to a potential outcome. So
yes.
Yeah, I'd say my biggest skill gap was probably early and attitudinal one, a sense of urgency to an actual outcome, and the comfort with operating with ambiguity.
100%. I think the deadlines are really different in industry and academia, and I think there's a bit more tinkering time in academia versus when you've got deadlines that are quite, impending on the other side of the fence. But the journey, as Rob said, has some very similarities between very similar things going on between the two. Anyway, you guys have said it all much more, with much more articulation than I have. So I'm sure you're both always across the landscape in health and med, and you see lots and lots of cool ideas. What is the one thing that you're looking for when it comes to a potential healthcare innovation, or a couple of things that you think are really important when you're looking at people with a new, interesting idea? Why don't you go first, Rob?
All right, this is a tough one because I see this stuff every day as well, and it's hard to kind of pin down. I think I get interested in everything, But I'm going to probably switch it and say, not the technology, but I'm more interested in the people. So, and particularly the passion and the genuineness that comes across, because usually you'd be surprised. There could be some things that from a technical level, you're just like, I have no interest in this, is boring, you know. But when you talk to the people and you see how they're passionate about it and what it could do and the background stories and everything else, and usually if they do it well, it translates how big that impact would be and who that impact will be for. So I think I look for the why and how that comes across from the person that's communicating with me. And fortunately, there's a ton of people around that are there, and I'm always encouraging them to kind of take it forward, see if you can move it forward. And you know, again, things like this will help them.
Gotcha. Thanks, Matthew.
Hey, look, I mean, 99 times out of 100, I see solutions that are to real world problems. But then the question is really, to me, the pivotal question is, who will pay for it and how much? And if you can answer that question, you can shape, you know, pretty much all else flows from that point. So if you've got a solution to a real world problem, who will pay for it and how much? And then just naturally track that back.
Gotcha. And what do you guys think people in research or academic settings need to hear about when it comes to translation of innovation? Because I think, you know, we learn lots of things that we should be doing. There's lots of information everywhere about, you know, what you should be doing and how you should be doing it. But what is it that they really need to personally maybe think about, and then also understand about translation of innovation? Well, yeah. Maybe Matthew, you'd like to kick us off?
Yeah, look, mine would be pretty simple. You don't have to go it alone, and there's plenty of people who want to help you succeed with your great idea.
Gotcha.
I'll go probably from the academic side as well. You always hear publish or perish. I think you should change that to deliver or disappear. You don't need to be the translator, but you always need to be able to identify innovations and be ready to support that innovation. So skill up and expose yourself to the ecosystem, and you'll do yourself a favor and potentially change the world. Yeah,
100%. And I would I would say the same sort of thing. I think the thing that's underestimated is the resilience. So it's not always a hot, cool trend, entrepreneurship. It is a tough road, and it can be a long road, especially in medtech and biotech. And I think that's one of the things that often gets forgotten about. And then, yeah, I think, you know, getting out there and doing, it's not going to happen when you're in your little bubble. So that makes a lot of sense. That about does it for this part of the talk. We've still got some questions in the chat. So I want to open up the virtual floor. If you've got some questions, pop them in the box and I'll navigate to the people where relevant. So yeah, thank you, Rob and Matthew. I'm going to start seeing some questions and throwing them your way. And Rebecca's online with us as well if you have any questions for MTP Connect or about the Ready program specifically. So we've got here, I'm part of a business development group with the aim to help researchers bring their research to market. I don't quite have my own idea per se. How do I fit into this program? Oops, I've lost the question, just need it in front of me. Well, I would say that if you've got, it doesn't matter if it's not your own idea yourself. I think even if you're within a company and there are ideas within, as Rob alluded to earlier, intrapreneurship, you're still a good fit for this program. As I said earlier, it's about having something to work on so that you really develop those skills in real time, and then you can go back and apply them no matter what you're doing. And when you do find that problem, you'll be able to apply those skills directly. So this program is still for everyone that's within maybe a bigger organization and identifying smaller problems within that organization. But yeah, we just encourage you to have something to work on. That would be my only thing.
I can say just something on that. Look,
yeah, sure.
And I'm not sure if that person is from a university or whatnot, but look, there's a lot of universities that do this well. There's a lot that could improve. So, and there's a lot of people in the roles that could help facilitate some of that translation. So again, it doesn't have to be like, if they are in that place where they're kind of seeing this, either encouraging the researcher or bringing the researcher along and helping them and be a part of it. Because part of that, like, get exposed to the ecosystem is all right, try it out. May not be the thing that you jump on 100% or go all the way through, but even being a part of it and doing it for even a fraction of the bit to understand how somebody would do it will benefit when you're then trying to link others to do it.
Fantastic. Any other comments from anyone else? Okay. I might throw to you, Rebecca. There's one here that says, will there be workshops or ways to help more mature products, or specifically products that are in trials and preparing to go commercial? Maybe you have an answer from some of the other ready initiatives that are going on.
Yep, thanks for the question, and thanks, Dharmica. So there are a number of other programs which are already up and running, and some which will be starting soon through our other partners as well. Some of the newer ones that are coming up, ARCS is doing a program around those who need to be looking at how to design clinical trials to meet regulatory or payer needs. Matthew touched on that in terms of who's going to pay for this. But so that's a program that's available. CFPharma is actually looking at a skills gaps relating to quality management and systems and protocols. So those who are actually interested in learning more about quality management systems needed to commercialise products, that's a program that's available. And we've also got BioIntellect, who's actually going to be doing programs around how to secure investment and that type of thing as well. But there's many other programs as well. There's some of the newer ones coming out. If you have a look at the MTP Connect website for Ready, it's actually got our existing partners on there. And you'll be able to find out more information about the courses that are available as well. So that was just calling out a few of the newer ones. I mentioned some of our existing partners in my little intro, but please do have a look on the website because there's a lot that's coming out and that's available.
Rebecca. Rob and Matthew, you've got a question here that says, what are the main reasons you see that ideas don't progress to products? And I guess you've both got a bit of experience in seeing these sorts of things. Who would like to go first? Any takers?
Matt, you got you have two giant experiences. Why don't you take that first?
Yeah, look, I think probably a failure to identify who will pay. And that's not necessarily an obvious, it's not an obvious question. Sorry, that question doesn't have an obvious answer in the medical device sort of ecosystem. There's quite a few people involved. You know, you've got patients, you've got professionals, you've got providers, the hospital networks, and you've got ultimately payers. And now in some countries, payers are big insurance networks or maybe, you know, schemes like Medicare. But in other countries, they're private payers. So you're both a patient and a payer. So look, if I look at some of the ideas that have been worthy in themselves and haven't successfully made it to market, I think in most cases it would be a failure to motivate the person who's going to benefit and connect it with the payment.
Gotcha. Rob?
My side, I think there's a lot of people with ideas that aren't necessarily products. And distinguishing between the two and finding that out. And even more, there's some ideas that are actually products, but not businesses. So there's a very big difference. So I think that you sometimes see like good things start to move, but they're needing to go into a different ecosystem, or they're actually not there yet. And that may just be a temporary situation, but I think that's a big thing. Everyone thinks what they're doing is the best, but you know, we got to evaluate that and either shelve it for the time or try to move forward. The other thing is fatigue. I mean, particularly in medical devices and others, even there are tons of good ideas that are actually products and actually could be businesses, but it could take 20 to 30 years to really make them successful. And that's a huge commitment, not just for one person, but for investors and your team and everything else. And, you know, often that, like I said, world can change, life can change, all sorts of things can change where it's just like, look, it's not worth the effort, or there's other opportunities that are even better to jump on. So I think it's just that the ping pong balls of opportunities that go and challenges often kind of batter you down, or at least ideas kind of fall to the wayside.
And do you have any comments on agility now that you're talking about, you know, so you see ideas that may not progress, based on people not being able to adapt to their environment very quickly, or in the time that makes sense? Do you think that's a thing that you see a lot of?
I think if you're not realizing that it used to be you could have a job for your whole life. I think 10 years ago it was you're going to change 5, 6 jobs in your career. Now you're going to change 5 or 6 careers. Like, you have to be agile. You need these skills to transfer over. And how you can do that, even often with your ideas, is think of them as platforms. Like, the most broad, you may be working on one thing, what's the closest next thing? And always keeping the eye out, because often some things that you go into will actually be, well, this is a bigger opportunity, we should be taking that. So as long as you have that vision and you're kind of keeping your eyes open to what's happening, and thinking about platforms versus products, then that will help you with it, being agile.
Yeah. Anybody else got a comment on that one? All good. I've got a question here about whether the idea that you're working on needs to be real, as in something that you're actively planning to do or already working on. The answer to that one is no. It should be a realistic problem though. But like I said earlier, back of the napkin idea, maybe it's a thought bubble you've had, like, imagine if we did this, because it would be so much easier. The whole purpose of this is to validate or invalidate an idea and understand what it means to validate or invalidate an idea, and why that happens, and what you do next if something's invalid. It's not completely game over. It means you've got to go away and think about what may work, and if there's no solution in that space, or it doesn't have a market fit, then you keep going and thinking. And that's the part of the evolving entrepreneurship and innovation, all of that sort of stuff. It's the skill set that you're taking on board. So the answer is, you can come with an idea, obviously, not something completely irrelevant to medtech and biotech, but something that's you've seen realistically that could be a solution for a problem you've identified. Nicholas has written us a message here. He's kindly said the course that he's been doing so far, the MedTech Foundations, has been a gem. Thank you, Nicholas, for the kind words. So he's got a question about team. So it seems to me that most important asset of any company is its team, as Rob was saying earlier as well. What are some of the biggest mistakes you've made in assembling a startup team? And what would you have done differently given what you know? So I will throw to anybody who wants to talk about this, but perhaps, yeah, Rob or Matthew, would one of you like to kick us off?
Well, I'll have a short stab at it. Look, the Rob's mentioned a couple of times, and I would fully support, is resilience. So the resilience of the team, it'll be a journey of emotional highs and emotional lows, and this idea of being agile, looking at maybe sort of the core, I guess, assets you have, your ideas or research, and then moving them into different products based on the agility and what do you discover as you have that journey. So as part of the team, that idea that it's a cohesive team, it's emotionally resilient, and it's agile. Get a group of people that can support each other through what can be a really tricky time. Very satisfying, but also tricky.
Gotcha.
I would say in the current, embodiment of what I'm doing, I mean, one of the things I mentioned was there will be a lot of people that want to help, a few that actually can. And I think early on in this, we had a lot of technical help, and we could have formed a team that was purely there and broadened out quite heavily. But our real skills gap was in certain bits of contracts, big scale negotiations with giant multinationals, 10 billion plus, and that sort of thing. So we actually went out, and originally there was someone who wanted to hire some of us, and we ended up saying, well, we actually want to hire you, and then it became a co-founder. So we had a gap that we filled, and it was a recognized gap for the time. So the team, it's more of what do you need at the moment, and where do you see that going into the future? Because everything you do, the more people you bring on, it's the more children you have to keep feeding and be accountable for. And they have to work within your culture and within your organization. So it's one of those things, like, sometimes friends are good, sometimes they're not good, sometimes family members are good, most of the time not so good. And keeping a core you know, like there is that hacker, hipster, hustler kind of keep it to 3 in the beginning. I mean, that's useful. It's not a hard and fast rule, but having your 3 most critical skills for the business, they bridge over, but having somebody who can manage it and that you can count on and that you can fight with, like, you need to be able to fight this stuff out and come back and be like, yep, we're going to move on. And it's not going to damage the business. So it's a tough one, but it's just finding those right people. Be very selective. And you don't have to rush into creating a team. That's one thing. And make sure that they're going to be around for the long run. It's a long game.
100%. And I know, Nicholas, you've asked for my comments as well, very specifically. And I guess I would just like echo some of Rob and Matthew's thoughts. It is about cultural fit. I think that's a big one, especially in a small team where uncertainty is an everyday way of life and you're just going to have to all feel the feels together. You really see how people start to crack when things go downhill, and that happens a lot in startups. So you need people that are going to be helpful to that, not hinder that roller coaster that is the journey. And again, hiring for the skill set that you're looking for. So not just, as both of these guys have said, not just hiring for the sake of hiring or bringing people in. We've seen a lot of that in the some of the small, startups that we see, starting out early. And I think it's important to really sit down and write, what is it that you need to solve? What are the skills that you need to solve that? And why do you need them now? And then you can start to project forward and think about how does that grow and what does that succession planning look like? And that's a thing that you can then grow towards and know what you need at every point in the journey. That would be my comment.
And I'll just add something to that as well. I think it's also about having your core team, and there's always limitations as well in terms of who you can have on your core team, but it's also ensuring that you've got a broad network of people that you can draw upon when the time comes, someone who's actually had commercialisation experience, someone who knows the regulatory pathway. They may not be on the core team, but it's part of your broader network that you can bring in and draw on when needed. And even just being aware of what are those other skills that you're going to have to draw upon at some stage, and having some sort of an awareness rather than just being completely tech focused to start with. So mapping out what the journey is and what skill sets you might need along the way, and starting to build that network as well to be able to draw upon as well.
That is 100% important, especially in our sector, because there's lots of different posts that you must hit on the journey. Got one more question, which is about the cost of the workshops, and is there our space is limited? They are limited. We have a set number per state. And we have a cost of around $200, or it is $200 for each workshop. So you'll see all the details on our website. Do we have any more questions? What kind of idea would we need to have? Devices and technology? What about drug development? You can come with anything that solves a problem in medtech or biotech. This is a broad scope, and MTP Connect support all of those verticals. So we will be taking ideas from all 4 verticals: devices, software as a medical device, therapeutics, and diagnostics. So, this is about, like I said earlier, and I know I sound like I'm repeating myself, but it is skills that can be applied to all of these things for an early stage idea and something you can take away and reuse later. Cool. I think we've wrapped up on questions. I'd like to wrap up here then and thank our panelists for their insights and their time today. Thank you, Rebecca and MTP Connect, for their support and making these workshops available. And thanks to everybody who tuned in today. We will have a QR code on the screen now to go to registration page so that you can apply for the workshops in your closest city. The dates and the lost something here. Oh, there it is. The QR code's up. The dates and the cities are on the websites, and the link to that website is in the chat. And as I said, we're running these from August to December. We've got limited spots, so get registering. Our first one will be here in New South Wales at Cicada Innovation on August 24th and 25th. So thank you all again, and have a really great rest of the day.